Hey everyone, welcome back to Grow Smarter, the show built for healthcare and wellness entrepreneurs who want to stop wasting money and start building practices that actually grow. I'm your host, Andrew Hong, founder of Toby Agency, and today's guest is someone I've had the pleasure of working with firsthand. Dr. Bermesola Dyer, aka Dr. B, is a doctor of nursing practice, a family nurse practitioner, and the founder of the Wellness NPs in Laurel, Maryland, a practice specializing in medical weight loss, hormone optimization, and menopause management. So here's what makes today's conversation a little bit different. Dr. B isn't just a clinician, she's a business owner approaching her 8-year anniversary, which puts her in a category that most healthcare practices never reach. She's navigated hiring challenges, operational chaos, and yes, even a literal fire, which we'll talk about, and to come out on the other side with a stronger practice and a clearer sense of mission. Today, we're talking about what it actually takes to stay in business as a healthcare entrepreneur. Not the launch story, the staying story. What does survival look like past year 5? What breaks, what holds, and what do you wish you'd known? If you're building a practice and wondering whether the hard part ever gets easier, this episode is for you. So let's get into it. Hey, Dr. B, how's it going?
Hey, Andrew. It's going well. It's going well. I can't complain.
So happy to have you here today. And we're obviously going to talk a little bit about this sort of, did the 8-year anniversary already pass or is it coming up
It's coming up in April.
in April?
We opened our doors 2019. I want to say the last week in April
Right
is when
on.
we actually opened our doors to start seeing patients. So I'm
So
excited.
you've sort of lived this life of there was a huge trend of people starting practices after COVID, right? And so
Right.
you've sort of been able to start your career in healthcare. You eventually started a practice, right? You had to navigate the COVID craziness that I think a lot of people had to do. But tell me a little bit about your background. How did you get into healthcare? What was your passion? What sort of inspired you to kind of get into the healthcare world?
Yeah, I have been a nurse, it's hard to believe, since 2000, so 26 years.
Wow.
I don't know where the time has gone. 26 years that I have been in the healthcare profession. I went to Johns Hopkins in Baltimore to get my nursing, bachelor's in nursing, something that I wasn't always passionate about it, but I started watching ER. I'm dating myself. And there was this Nurse Carol who was on there, and I just loved Nurse Carol. So I said I wanted to be a nurse because of Nurse Carol on ER, the emergency room. So anyways, went to school, got my bachelor's in nursing, and then decided, worked for about 10 years and then went back to get my become a nurse practitioner. And then from that point, just started getting my hands, just developing more and more experience in the world of being a nurse practitioner. And then I'm from California. So I'm from California. I moved to the East Coast to go to school, stayed on the East Coast to do all this different schooling from a master's in nursing and healthcare administration, a doctorate in nursing practice. And then I went back to California to be with family and stayed there for several years. And while I was there, I had the opportunity to work in a practice that was dealing with medical weight loss. And it wasn't something that I was really familiar with because I worked in the hospital setting.
Yeah.
Yes. When I was in the hospital, it's kinda I felt like I was a pill pusher where I'm just pushing medications all the
Sure.
time on patients, and I was like, "Man, there has to be a better way than this." Would love to get to our patients before we're having to do amputations or they're having to do
Yep.
bypass surgery for heart attacks or what have you. So, I was excited when I had the opportunity to work in a medical weight loss practice. It wasn't something that I really had been exposed to in school, and so when I was
Yeah.
there working, it was like, "Oh my goodness, I really like this because I'm helping them learn how to eat and,
Yep.
nutrition, getting their blood pressure under control because we're working on their weight." And so after I started working there, I knew that when I did eventually return to the East Coast, that I would wanna look into potentially doing something on my own, after I decide once I left the West Coast. So that's, kind of how it evolved, and then when I came back, I was in the military, went on a deployment and was working on my business plan while I was on my deployment when I had some downtime. And then when I came back, that's when I said, I want to do this and let's start this practice. And so
Cool.
from that point on, I kind of haven't looked back. It's something that's been very fulfilling for me. We definitely came in before the craze of the weight loss. Our specialty
I
is
know. Yeah.
hormone medical weight loss. So before the GLP-1s, there weren't a lot of different options, and
Yep.
there weren't a lot of practices that were really willing to delve into it because a lot of insurance companies were not accepting, the providers who were they weren't accepting insurance, but we
So
were
you're
willing.
one of the OGs, right? Like you're like one of them who got
Really?
into this before GLP-1s, before this whole craze. Yeah.
Right. Yes, yes, yes. So I feel like we have a really good ground and we've been able to evolve with the times and we
Yep.
love the GLP-1s, but we have this foundation of just passion for what we do. And we didn't jump in just because we wanted to make money, but we really want to focus on preventative health care,
Yep.
wellness, moving into that space of functional medicine's root cause to help patients lose the weight, keep the weight off, address some of the other underlying issues that may be contributing to their weight issues. So it's been a very rewarding journey. Hasn't been easy, but it's been rewarding along the way.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
we're going to talk about it's not easy, period. And there's the not easy part of the being an NP and being a healthcare professional and a wellness professional, but there's also the business side of it too, which we're obviously going to get into today. But before we go there, and maybe we had talked about this before, and for the audience out there, Dr. B is a client of ours and we've worked together. We're working together now. Um, where in California are you from originally?
Born and raised in the Bay Area.
Oh, in the Bay. Okay, cool. Yeah.
Went to UC Berkeley, Cal Berkeley in Berkeley, California,
Yeah.
and pretty much lived there for the first
Yeah.
25 years of my life.
So
Like,
I grew up in San Jose in the
oh,
South
that's
Bay.
right. We're from the same
Yeah,
from San Jose, California.
that's right. And then I moved to the DC area during high school. My parents had moved during that. And then I moved back to California. I lived in LA for a little bit. Now I live in Utah, which was a more recent move. But we have that like West Coast, East Coast, West Coast connection, which I totally forgot about.
I can't believe what high school did you go to? Or
I went
high
to Langley High School in McLean. Yeah.
Okay, okay, and that's in
In Northern Virginia. In California, I went to school in Saratoga. So I went to Harker High School, which is a private high school in
yeah.
Saratoga. So I rode the Caltrain up and down from the South Bay
Oh,
up
gosh, you're
there.
bringing back memories.
Yeah,
Okay.
totally.
Independence High School is
Oh,
within
you went
South.
to Independence? Oh, that's so funny. Yeah, we actually played them for tennis a few times, actually.
Right.
Indy for sure. Yeah,
I played
that's hilarious.
basketball, I ran track for Independence, and I was in the marching band too. I played the trumpet, so God.
Oh wow. Wow. That's why we hit it off so well because we kind of like came from the same
Yep.
places and lived in the same places.
Yeah, really.
Um awesome. So let me ask you, let's just fast forward to today, right? Yeah, we're recording this episode at the end of February in 2026 and um I'm just curious like, and I'll set a little context for you here. We met through Elite NP, right? And that's how we kind of found out about each other. And, there's no shortage of people trying to start practices today, right? And still, it was obviously a big trend during COVID and it continues to be a trend where I think a lot of people are sort of dismayed by working in a big healthcare system or like you mentioned earlier, having to push pills and things like that. Like you don't feel like you're like meeting them at the end of their life, not trying to help them live their life. You know what I mean? And so like, I think a lot of times when I talk to a lot of practices that are just getting started, like there's this whole business side to running a practice, right? And um, not everyone makes it 8 years, frankly, right? Not and frankly, like even if you just look at the general small business statistics that are out there, like 80+% of businesses fail in their first year. I think that the stat out there was like 95% or something like that fail in like their fifth year, right? So if you've been around for 5 years or more, there's probably a good chance that you're going to make it and you're going to survive. But man, the statistics are for sure against people who are starting their practice, right? So now that you're here at year 8, like what does that feel like to you, right? Do you feel like you're in a place where things are a little more stable right now? Or are you in a place where you're thinking about growing more for the future, right? We'll talk about where you're going. We'll talk about kind of how you got here. But what's your sort of mindset right now that you're kind of moving into your 8th year?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. But I'm definitely getting closer to my 50s,
Yep.
and life is, shifting my perspective on life and what I want to do and how hard I want to work and enjoy life and family and friends is shifting. Is shifting. Being a business owner takes a lot. It takes a lot it takes a lot out of you, and it requires a lot of sacrifice. So, I would say last year, year 7. I felt like we were starting to get some wind under our sail and starting to get established the place where we're finally starting to get the ball rolling. The revenue was starting to come in better. We're starting to make a little bit of a profit, like that was a comfortable profit.
Yep.
Um, so looking back, from where I started the very beginning, I remember it took a long time to even get our first patient through the door. My first patient was one of my closest friends, and I think she was my first
Yes.
patient and only patient for probably about 5 or 6 months. It was very slow. It was
Were
very
you still working on the side? Like
Oh,
you
I
were,
s still
yeah,
working. I'm actually going even though I still teach. I still am a nurse educator, a
yep,
professor at the university, but it took a long time, to kinda get the momentum. And my mindset just I didn't wanna go into a lot of debt, and I know a lot of businesses will take on a lot of debt in the beginning, so I funded a lot. I saved a lot, I put a lot aside, and I
good for you.
funded all on my own. I did not use credit, which is crazy, but that was just my goal was to try not to have a lot of debt, and I think that's some of the reason why I'm still here, but also a reason why I may be moving slower than other companies may have chosen to take on a lot of debt from the front end. It was just what wasn't my comfort zone to do. But looking back, the fact that we're here at year 8, especially like you were saying, those stats, it's very difficult for businesses. A lot of businesses don't make it to year 5. We had our 5-year anniversary, a few years ago. We brought patients in who had come through and lost lots of weight. We were able to see their before and after pictures, hear their testimonials, and it was so heartfelt and so rewarding to see what the practice had where we had started and where we were at our 5-year anniversary
Yeah.
gala. And so now here at year 8, it's still it's still hard to fathom, like, we're here. I don't know. We'll go into the whole thing with the fire. I'll just bring it up now. So now at
Yeah.
year 8, it's almost like we were starting to get like I said, we were starting to take off and get progress, but then we had a fire on December 12th of last year. When my staff called me and told me about it, I thought they were just saying, "Oh, we're smelling smoke in the building," and I'm thinking, "Oh, maybe someone left some popcorn, in the microwave," and it came up to our floor. By the time I got to the office, like, they sent me pictures, and I'm seeing flames coming out of the roof. And by the time I got there were about 20 different firemen on top of the roof,
Oh,
fire trucks everywhere, the roads closed off, smoke and flames everywhere,
yeah.
there's smoke everywhere, the staff smell like smoke, and I realized, wow, this is a lot more serious than what I was anticipating. And from that point on, it really has, I would say, from just from last year up until now, it's been us just really trying to stabilize, because you don't really prepare or plan for something like that. I do a lot of planning. Like business owners, we like to plan every scenario,
Yep.
staffing, shortfalls, not bringing enough revenue. You try and plan, but that's not something you really can ever be prepared for. You never really think it's going to happen to you. And so when it happened, it was like, especially at the very end when they finally put the sign out and put on, there's a sign on the wall on our door, do not enter, billing has been deemed unsafe.
Condemned. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And so then we're left with, okay, what do we do now? We don't have a place to go. What do we tell
Yep.
our patients? Our patients are still coming in because they didn't realize we had the fire.
Crazy.
Having to see and be seen, and we're having to tell them, "I'm sorry, we can't." So that this year and last year, the end of last year has definitely we've been like the rug has been pulled from us, and we're trying to regroup. And right now, our goal is just to try and stabilize,
Yeah.
um, to regroup and figure out what our next steps are. So there's a lot of uncertainty right now,
Yep.
a lot of uncertainty, not quite sure. I think for me, what I'm realizing for anyone, if you're going to start a business, I will say you don't want to go into anything that you don't absolutely love and you're not passionate about because
True.
when you
Yeah.
hit rough times, you probably it'll be hard to keep going. You'll have to ask yourself, and that's what I've had to do the last 8 years. Like I can't say that there's usually at least once a week I'm like, "You know what? I'm done. I'm throwing in the towels. I can't do it anymore. It's too hard. I'm just done." But I am a woman of faith, so I pray a lot, I fast, I meditate, I read the word, and there's just always something that the Lord does to put
Yep.
implants in my spirit to say, you can do it, you can make it. Someone may come and say something, I may hear a song, and that's a lot of what's gotten me through because it has been very difficult. The fire is definitely taken a lot out of me, but, I've had a support
Yeah. And as a woman of faith, right? And like I think there's always tests that test your resilience, right? And
oh, yeah.
test your faith in the process and sort of, this is all part of the game. And I always say, like, if you're winning 51% of the time and you're losing 49, you're winning, you know, even though that's an F, right? But
Yeah.
for some reason we feel like and there's this as someone who studies like the teachings of Buddha, like there's this saying where you can't have light without dark and you can't have dark without light, right? And so you almost try to treat things almost as if they're the same. And for any people who are tennis fans out there in Wimbledon, there's a quote above like the entrance to center court, and I'm gonna butcher this phrasing by it's Rudyard Kipling, right? But
Mhm.
it basically the idea of the saying is that if you can you can win if you can learn how to treat disaster and triumph as the same,
Right.
right? And so the second we start to not get emotional, right, or lose your resilience because you hit a tough spot, or frankly, like even lose your resilience if you hit good times, because we all lose our resilience when things are too good, you know? But I think like you're going through, you've built the practice, you've talked to thousands of patients, over the years. You have a brand, right, in your community, and obviously, in the education space as well. But when things like this happen, it's like all of the resilience you kind of built up over those 8 years, that's the test to see if you're going to use it, right?
It
And
is.
it could be really easy to quit. It could just, let me just take the insurance money. I'm done with this. Like, I'll get rid of all of this stuff and I'll be done. But obviously, you have a passion for what you do and for a passion for helping people. And in light of all the crap that comes along with trying to run a business, right? Like, is it that passion of yours of helping folks with their weight, with their hormones, with their lives? Is that what keeps you in that sort of sense of resilience? What motivates you and kind of keeps you going when there's a literal fire, that you had nothing to do with, that comes and just burns everything down, you know?
Definitely passion, and I feel like it's a calling. It's a calling and a
Yeah.
life's mission.
Yeah.
I always knew that I wanted to teach as when I was 5 years old, people were like, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" I said, "I wanted to teach." I didn't know what it looked like, but I'm doing a lot of teaching, a lot of educating, a lot of coaching with my patients, also with my students as a nurse educator, a professor. But the calling and the passion is what I think is keeping me. I think I'm gonna kinda butcher this statement too. It's like when you find your calling, like, instead of like, you don't feel like you're working. I can't remember what it is. It's some
Totally.
you could work
Yeah.
for
It
free.
doesn't, yeah.
Essentially, you just don't feel like you get up, you go to work, but you don't really feel like you're working at all. And that's how it feels to me. I just love getting up, going in and serving my community, serving my patients, seeing them go through these transformations. It is so fulfilling to me. So I do feel like I have a life of fulfillment from the work that I do. And no matter how long it takes or how hard it is, I can continue to go because it just fills me. It fills my cup with being able to do what I love.
I wanted to ask you a question. This is something that really comes up very common with the newer practices that I talk to. And not every practice is actually a good fit for marketing, right? And you kind of mentioned earlier that you didn't want to go in debt, that you kind of your first patients were your friends. And I'll say that actually to, I think you might have even heard me say this in one of the classes or information sessions we were in, but like a lot of times when I meet a new practice, I kind of tell them like, you got to hit the ground, right? You got to go talk to your network. You got to tell them
Mhm.
what you're doing. You can't just do more. And this is for all the practices out there that are getting started. Um, the thing you probably want to invest in when you first get started is maybe a decent website, and don't go spend $10,000 on a website for sure, right? You might have to spend a couple of $1,000s to build a decent website, or you can do it yourself, but build yourself a decent website, because inevitably when you're going to go talk to your friends, your family, they're going to refer you to folks, like you need to show them that you're a real business, right? And having that website is important. But I wanted to ask you, like, for those who might just be starting practices, What do you recommend to folks who might be just trying to get their first patients? My recommendation is don't go invest in marketing and ads because that's not the best place to start. You actually, in fact, I'll tell everyone this. Don't do marketing unless you have public testimonials online.
Mhm.
Nobody is going to go allow you to stick a needle in them, allow you to draw blood for them, allow you to get into their health history without at least seeing some testimonials first, right? That's usually my rule of thumb is if you have no public testimonials, it's very hard to acquire patients with digital marketing. So I'm kind of curious from your perspective, if someone was just starting out, for the first time and they're trying to forget all the operations and all that other stuff, just assume they've got the supplies and the vendors lined up and that stuff. But how would you recommend getting that sort of first couple of patients and getting that first, lick of revenue?
So, like I mentioned before, I definitely think reaching out to your core network, friends, family, people that already know you, when you start introducing yourself as, "Hey, this is what I'm doing now." A lot of times, people are like, "Oh, really? I want to come in and see your services." In the beginning, too, I definitely was really active on social media and Facebook, and so I would
Cool.
go on and talk about different things that we did. I'd have different educational
Great.
sessions, the testimonials, we would do a lot of testimonials, have before and after pictures of people and what
Yep.
they were doing, like our 1 year anniversary. That's when I started bringing people in and having them show their pictures of this is what I looked like before, the before and after pictures and talking about their experience working with us and what they learned. And then next thing I started having people pop up into our feed like, oh my goodness, can you tell me more about your service and
Yep.
can I come and visit you? So social media, I think, is a great way. It doesn't cost much. We didn't
Yep.
do any marketing on social media. It didn't cost much. It was just more so word of mouth and hearing people, the testimonials, and then me going in and promoting and talking about the services. And I'd have people want to reach out to talk and ask questions and want me to provide them services. So that was a easy and a big way or effective way of bringing people in the doors.
Awesome. Yeah, I think the advice out there to like new practice owners is certainly build a website if you can or want to, but if you're not going to build a website, invest in one social media channel, right? Like put all the stuff that Dr. B was kind of talking about, testimonials, educational content, things like that. Post that on your Instagram and just centralize everything to your Instagram, but don't do Instagram, don't do TikTok, don't do like build a half-baked website, right? Like pick one really good channel that you're comfortable on doing and just focus on that channel, right? I think a lot of times we tend to spread ourselves a little bit too thin. Also, a lot of did you have a physical location when you first started, Dr. B?
I did.
You
We
did?
at a physical location. Yeah.
I think that's also a really big, an important point because a lot of time I'll meet healthcare and wellness professionals who want to get started and they only want to do telehealth. And certainly I understand that, right? I understand there's a lot more overhead to having a location, but something that a lot of people don't understand is that yes, you don't have a physical location or you don't have to pay rent in a physical location if you're doing telehealth, but the problem is that you kind of pay a marketing tax, right? If
Mm.
you're only telehealth, because one way that people look for your clinic or your practice is through Google Maps and near me searches. If you don't have a address or a physical location in your community, you basically are invisible to those searches, right? Then what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to build out a ton of content on your website that says like this is why I'm the best, hormone replacement therapy specialist in Laurel, Maryland, right? You're going to have to create a bunch more content from a
Ye
marketing perspective to make up for those physical location searches, right? So a lot of people think they're saving money by not having a physical location, but that also clips your wings a little bit from a marketing perspective. And I think that's actually why Dr. B, maybe that was a good investment for you to start out with and in the beginning because it really allows you to get found in those more local, more bottom of funnel, if you would, searches. So I just wanted to point that distinction out to folks who are just starting to practice. Um, Question for you. So building a team, this is notoriously like a difficult thing to tackle for any small business, frankly, right? Are they W-2? Are they 1099? Do they work on commission? If I'm bringing an esthetician in, and I know that you're not doing the more med spa type services because you're more focused on women's health. But how did you think about hiring? Was it bringing in other clinicians? Was it finding support staff, whether they were offshore, or onshore? Like, how did you, as you started to grow and you started to kind of build your practice, how did you think about hiring and what were sort of the important hires you made? And more importantly, what were some bad sort of decisions that you made around hiring in the beginning?
Yeah, I had to get guidance from my attorney and my accountant when I was deciding on W-2 versus 1099
Yep.
because I had been doing research on them. I didn't want to make the wrong decision because I, heard the stories about the 1099s and businesses ending up having to pay a lot of fees and taxes and fines as a result of
Yeah.
mis
Classifying.
classifying, right? Misclassifying employees versus 1099. So all of our staff right now are 1099s. We have 5 nurse practitioners, including myself. I think we have 3 nurses, 3 registered nurses. We have medical assistants. We have a practice
Wow.
manager. We have virtual assistants. So we have a lot of support staff that are there to help. And all of them, for the most part, are all the virtual assistants. They're obviously the 1099s, but
Yep.
for they're not even 1099s because they're outsourced.
Yep.
But for the most part, all of our practice, people who are part of our practice are W-9s.
Yep.
It was a difficult decision. I would love to do 1099, because of the benefits in terms of like all of the tax savings, but that's just, I wanted to keep things clean, not run into any issues. And so that's the direction that we went. But it was, in terms of hiring, I will tell you the staffing, they are your most important asset, but they also can be a very, very, very difficult liability as well. So
Sure.
I am learning, and it's just something that we're still going through. Just a little bit of backstory. I was a house supervisor for an organization, so a nursing supervisor, and with that, you're dealing with a lot of a lot of staffing of nurses and off the floors, and trying to make sure that you have adequate staffing. So when I took that role, I didn't realize it was preparing me for what I do
Totally.
because there is so much turnover,
Yeah.
call out, sick calls. You're trying to shuffle, put people here, cover this unit. So all of that at the time, it was a headache for me. And I was pulling my hair out almost every night trying to put pieces to the puzzle together. But I realize now that it was really it was good preparation for what I'm having to do now, and just trying to constantly manage the turnover, because the medical profession, no matter where you go, I think there's just a lot of turnover within the profession. Dealing
Totally.
with professionalism, different generations, folks have
Yeah.
different mindsets, whether you're Gen X, Gen Z, everyone's different. Working with onboarding, it's a lot. Staffing can kind of make the practice or break the practice, is what I've learned. And we're still trying to feel, I can't say that we're not where I would like to be in terms of
Yeah.
getting the whatever the solution is, not the solution, what is it? I'm thinking of a formula, the right formula to
Yeah.
really have good people. But I will say I have a wonderful core team of nurse practitioners who have been with me a long time, as well as my executive team have also just been rock solid and consistent. And they've been very supportive through the fire, through COVID, just through a lot of different things that we've gone through. So can say that I do have a good, solid team that have been wonderful through our growth, and just through the time that we've been here.
When you brought on your first sort of clinicians to, I guess, I was assuming grow the practice and have more appointment slots available, those sorts of things. One of the challenges that I see practices as they're starting to scale is they they want to bring in new clinicians, but they don't necessarily have the patient volume yet to fill that clinician's entire schedule. So they kind of like work sort of part-time or like,
Mhm.
when they're available, which is a tricky thing because like it's like from a marketing perspective, you want as many appointment availabilities as you can, but you can't offer that unless you actually have someone who has that opening, right? And it's sort of this chicken before the egg kind of thing. Um, how did you think about that challenge when you were starting to bring on your first clinicians? Did you feel like you were already busting at the seams and you're like, okay, I cannot do this anymore. Like, we just need to bring someone in. And even if they're not full to start with, like, we're going to get them filled up because of where our trajectory is going? Or did you do what some folks do, which is like, I'm just going to get them part time. They're going to put their available appointments, on there. And then as we start to fill them up and we get more patient volume, then we can bring them on full time. How did you sort of approach that sort of conundrum?
Yeah, that the second one is what I've done. A lot of
Yeah.
our providers are part-time per diem. Some of
Yeah.
them are like they have families, they don't wanna commit to
Yep.
working 40 hours a week. So for the most part, we're doing a lot of per diem part-time. We all have designated dates, and then the providers have designated dates that they work on the schedule, rotating shifts on the weekends, and that seems to work well for our practice.
Why
It seems to work
why
well.
why has that worked well, do you think? Because I know a bunch of practices that try to do that. It doesn't work well, right? Like the wrong expectations are set, or sometimes I've even had times where the clinician will have availability and then they no show for appointments, right? Which is just terrible, right?
It
Um,
is. I haven't had I think the
is it
group of
just picking
providers that
the right ones you got? And
I've had that issue with our non-licensed people. It's
oh,
the
right.
people licensed, but not the nurse practitioners. I haven't
Yeah.
had that. They definitely maintained a level of professionalism, but some of the other ancillary staff, our medical assistants and LPNs, I've definitely have had some role turnover where people just they never show up to work, and you're thinking like, how do you do that? How do you just
Yeah.
show up to work, no call, no show, you never see them again, unfortunately. But the nurse practitioners have been wonderful for the most part. And I think the flexibility that I really do try to be as flexible as I can with our staff, realizing the importance of family, issues with childcare,
Yep.
family requirements, and we want to be a family friendly and family supportive practice. And so when people have issues, we're not trying to force them their hand to say you have to be here, and they show up for their. Because I don't have any issues with them not showing up. So, and we work together. If somebody has a sick child, we're trying to take care. We'll cover your shift for you. So I think we're just all supportive of each other, realizing the flexibility. We give each other the flexibility that we need, but for the most part, everyone's really consistent with showing up when they're supposed to.
Do you think your background in staffing has anything to do with this? Because it sounds like you make it sound like a lot easier than it is. Because
It isn't, but I'm very creative. I'm
yeah,
very
there
creative
you go.
with my staffing, and it's
Yep.
because we had to do that. We were pulling what is it, tricks, the little rabbits out of our hat when we were in the and this what I'm doing right now is not like life threatening. When I worked in the hospital,
Right.
we're codes, people are cracking chest open. That you had to make difficult decisions on making sure that your ICU was always, staffed with people. It was a lot more stress than what I'm even though this is stressful, I find
Yeah.
creative ways to make sure that we have adequate staffing. There are times I do have to step in and go in and work on days that I don't want to because we're short. COVID was horrible. COVID pushed me to the envelope. And some of that was just because everyone was out with COVID. All the staff was sick.
Yeah.
We had to make this difficult decisions about just actually closing the office because we had no staff. But yeah, I definitely think there's a lot of creativity that goes into when you have a brick and mortar trying to figure out how, with a lot of
Yeah.
staff shortages and the competition out there, to make sure that you have
And
adequate.
again, I always try to inject sort of a sense of realism into everything that we talk about on these podcasts. And like not everyone is suited to run a business, right? And I hate to say it like that, but it's the truth. And if you're someone who we all get frazzled. We all get frazzled really easily. But I think it's your ability to recover from a fire or the person not showing up or whatever and just get into that problem solving mode like right away, right? And if you're somebody who kind of like breaks down a little bit when you need to solve that problem, like this may not be the best thing for you to do, right? Because you not only have to handle your patients, right? And all the challenges and things that you got to solve for your patients, but there's all the challenges and things you got to solve for your business, right? And so, again, kind of going along this line of resilience and sort of the resilience that you've built, I think, not only being in the healthcare field, but working the administrative, the icky parts, right? The crappy parts of your job. Like you'd love your job if you didn't have to do all these other things, right? But it comes with the territory, right? And so I think if you're ever thinking about growing or scaling your practice, um, the the team building is just such a critical part of it. And it sounds like you've actually built a pretty good team over the years, and you've done a good job keeping them together and motivating them, and making sure that it's like a family kind of environment, which is awesome. But I definitely meet a lot of other practices where it's just a revolving door for even the licensed ones, right? Not just the admin staff or the unlicensed folk. It's just like I know NPs that didn't show up for their appointments. And so it's a very difficult thing when you're the brand owner and you're the one getting the heat from it, right? For something that you didn't necessarily do, but it comes with the territory, right? With it. So no, I think that's really important to point out this whole staffing thing because we all want to grow, but there are some really challenging things that come along with that sort of like next stage of growth. And I think you touched on a few of those
Yeah.
things. Yeah.
You have to put a lot of trust in your staff, and I think this fire, what it's hard to see how you can really come out or learn from that, and I'm really trying to take a step back
Yeah.
to look at it. It's exposed a lot of deficiencies, which is a good thing because I wanted to scale. Our goal was to scale, but we
Right.
kept hitting our head, and you're just having so many different issues. And so, as a result of the fire, it's requiring us to take a step back, look at our processes, look at our staffing, our onboarding, and all these different things. I'm utilizing that because we don't even have the capacity or the bandwidth to grow right now. The space that we're in, we have one room. We had 5 rooms
Right.
before. So this is the time that I said, well, since we can't really focus on growing right now, we're going to focus on fine tuning and getting our processes iron sharp, that we really have a good process when we come out and we're back into our new, or when we're back into our space. But the staffing is a really, really big issue. And one thing that I'm finding, because I don't know everything, I've learned a lot over the years,
Yeah.
that there's been a lot that I didn't know that I needed to know, and I learned at a very expensive, like at a cost.
We
And so
all do.
yeah, I realized the importance of having consultants and mentors to help guide me and to make difficult decisions, to see things from different angles. I do a lot of
Yeah.
coaching. So, I'm a part of coaching teams to try just to help me. Because if you try and do this by yourself without support or without mentoring or without anyone there, it's a very lonely space, especially the longer you're in this game.
Yep.
And it's really easy to get discouraged and want to give up. So I think having a big support team, whether it's the staff, it's coaches, experts, other accountants, finance people, even you, Andrew, for the marketing component,
Yeah.
all those people play a really important role in helping your business be successful. And so I rely heavily on my outside resources to help me.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about marketing actually. I always say you know, um, like marketing is an investment, right? And which means that when I talk about an investment, it's like you got to put money up front and you may not get that money back,
Yeah.
right? And you may not get that money back right away. You might get it in 30 days, you might get it in 60 days, but the goal is to get that money back and some. That's what return on investment is, ROI, right? Really what I'm speaking to is like there's a lot of practices that are like, "Oh, I just go build an awesome website and I'll run some ads and I'll get some customers right away." And marketing just doesn't work like that anymore. It's just there's a lot of there's first of all, there's a lot more competition these days, right? There's a lot more choices, and the internet is just a much more crowded place than it was 5 or even 10 years ago. So I'm curious, Dr. B, like when you first, what was the best marketing investment that you sort of made, when you felt comfortable making your investment in marketing? And is that still a good channel or a good investment for you today?
Yeah, we were able to find a platform that was able to do a lot of different things within it. So it was building SEO, it
Hmm.
was sending out the newsletters to patients, it
Yep.
was developing the website, helping us manage our leads. It kind of was like
And
a
this is Patient Gain, correct? Like
it
you
was
initially started working with
right,
them.
right,
Yep.
right. It's
Hmm.
been a long time. And we were working with people. We had our own website. We had no people, nobody was coming to that website.
Yeah.
It was a pretty website. It looked so nice, but we never had any traction, no leads. It was just dead. And we
Yeah.
did a couple of those similar platforms to Patient Gain, and just didn't find that the money was worth it. We just we're putting a lot of money in, but not really getting anything out. But
Yeah.
investing in something like that particular company, we found that we've been able to, we do pay a nice sum for the monthly fees, but we've been able to bring in leads organically through it
Yep.
and without having to invest a lot in the marketing with, like, Google. We were
Yep.
doing a lot of marketing in Google, and we just didn't find, especially for weight loss, we just didn't get the ROI was just not there. We did a
Yeah.
lot of marketing on Facebook trying to do and they were blocking a lot of the content
Yep.
we were trying to put out there, and the money was just going nowhere. So we found that the word of mouth, our before and after
Organic. Yeah.
testimonials, and then also building up content and putting pictures and my videos and things on our page seemed to help us out the most.
I think the investment in organic is such an important one in the beginning because I kind of look at it as like compounding interest, right? You kind of like make this investment and then it just builds and builds and builds on top of itself without you having to invest more. And so I think that was a smart thing for you to do in the very beginning was to
Mhm.
make those kind of investments. Did you have revenue coming through you already before you decided to sign up for this platform?
We did, but it definitely wasn't as much. It
Yeah.
definitely wasn't as much, no, and that was the reason why we decided we wanted to look somewhere else because we were
Yep.
spending so much, but the ROI, the revenue return on the investment just wasn't there. But after we made the change, now if you put searches for, best weight loss place near me or something, you'll find us at the top,
Yep.
or 2 on the top of the searches, which is it's hard to do. So yes, I definitely can say I noticed a big difference when we utilize that platform. It worked really well.
Great. Great. Um, let's change gears a little bit and talk a little bit about weight loss. I think that's something that you've obviously, even before, GLPs were a thing, like you were interested in the different modalities, and looking at weight loss, whether it's medical weight loss, looking at nutrition, coaching, kind of the full spectrum of things. How do you like approach these days with people knowing so much about on the internet about GLP-1s and things like that? How has the sort of the mindset or the psyche of the new weight loss patient changed from maybe when you even before you started the practice to like where it is today with this, obviously a big focus on GLP-1s and things like that. What's been the evolution of this kind of customer and sort of what do they look like today?
New customer is very educated and informed,
Yeah.
and oftentimes will come in with something, a treatment plan, a care plan in mind that they
Oh,
want.
interesting. Huh.
Yeah, and so they kinda come in with the mindset, some of them, not everyone, that they
Hmm.
want these shots, and when you're trying to get to, like, one of the things we like to focus on is root cause, and we have a comprehensive six different pillars that we're focusing on,
Yep.
and, to get them to a place of wellness, and to which includes weight loss, but oftentimes people just want the shots. I just give me the shots, I don't want anything else, just give me the shots, give me shots, give me shots. And sometimes they'll try and force your hand and push you into a place where, "Oh, no, you gonna give me the shots. I don't need to hear anything else. I just want my shots. I don't care about my blood pressure. I don't care about my blood sugar. I don't care about my hormones." And so we kind of have to do a lot of educating
Yep.
for them to understand where we're going and the direction we're going because we're looking at not just getting the weight off, but keeping the weight off. And that's
Yep.
another hard part. It's hard to lose the weight, but it's even harder to keep the weight off because we have the set
Yep.
point. So a lot of our patients come in, I will say a lot of them come in with like a sense of demand, honestly, that's what they want. And then some come in just not knowing or really understanding that obesity is considered now has been identified as a disease process. It's a reoccurring, relapsing, chronic
Right.
condition similar to high blood pressure, cholesterol, other disease processes. So with that in mind, the way that we treat this, it's not like a quick fix where you can take these shots and then you just kind of go back to after you get to your weight, you go back to where you were, and then next thing you know, you put the weight back on because it's something that you really do have to manage throughout the life. It's pretty much until death you part. Not necessarily that you're on the medications, but that you are making these adjustments to your lifestyle. So sometimes it's hard to have the patients understand that the medications are a tool, as it relates to the GLP-1s, and then also understanding that it's not their fault. because for so long, many of us, even myself, before I started working in the medical weight loss, it was just diet and exercise. If you just stop eating, put the fork down, and go run around the track, you'll lose the weight. And that it is so much more complex. The science is starting
Yep.
to show it's much more complicated than just diet and exercise. There's so many other components to this problem or to this disease process. And so trying to get that out to the masses, even the insurance companies who just feel like this is a lifestyle issue and the reason why you
Right.
can't lose weight is because it's a moral failure on your end. You just don't have self-control, and it's much more complicated. And so many of our patients struggle with, low body image, self-esteem image, feeling of isolation because society has pushed them, made fun of
Yep.
them, just made them feel really bad. So it's a very difficult disease process. I've had patients come in tears. They're in tears, frustrated because they can't get the weight off. They're trying so hard, and their spouse is giving them a hard time, or they're having
Mm.
like discrimination at work. It's such a difficult disease process, and my hope is eventually that we continue to have this conversation and change the narrative about what the disease of obesity is, and that it's not just about diet, exercise, and having self control. It's much more complicated than that.
Yeah. Um, it's interesting. Like there are a lot. Obviously, my world is kind of the keyword world. Like, what are people looking for on Google, right? And
Yeah.
obviously, medical weight loss, GLP-1s have been a pretty, hot topic, over the past few years. But one thing I wanted to maybe touch on was your specialty in women's health, and sort of, I think that's kind of where you're sort of building your like have built your specialty and kind of built your focus, especially with some of the work that we've done together. Um, I'm curious, like, so, and I'll set this context. I was just looking up for another client on perimenopause and sort of symptoms related to perimenopause, and there are over 300,000 monthly searches for perimenopause symptoms or sort of a related things, right? Um, I just, with another, one of our clients just recorded she just launched a podcast called The 40-Year-Old Woman, which was, for any Steve Carell fans out there, like a funny little take on, women sort of entering this kind of period in their life. Right. And, um, tell me a little bit about this sort of new focus on perimenopause and the sort of elder millennial woman, right? That is maybe entering this kind of period in their life. Um, like what has your focus been on when it comes to women's health and specifically when it comes to perimenopause, but also sort of menopause and how are you using some of the functional health and sort of like the modalities that you've sort of, been accustomed to sort of treat these things?
So we ended up moving into the space of women's health. I think it was an evolution of the weight loss because we
Yep.
had many patients who were doing everything we were telling them to do, the diet, the exercise. We were addressing some of the hormone stuff. One of the big things is
Some of it, yeah.
inconsistent. We were addressing all of the diet, exercise. We got the GLP-1s. We were getting patients up to the top doses of the GLP-1s, and they still weren't losing, and they were complaining of, the other symptoms. They couldn't sleep. They were having the hot
Yep.
flashes, and these other different things were going on. Their libido was low. They were feeling tired, fatigue, cold hands, cold feet. And what I started to realize that there was something else that was going on that was potentially preventing them from losing their weight. And so the more research, the more training that I started to do, because there was just some patients I just couldn't get the weight off. And I was like, what is going on? Why can't I get this off? One of our patients came in who happened to be a midwife, and she mentioned to me, like, hey,
Mhm.
you should really look at doing, hormone optimization in your clinic. She'd been doing that from another location that she was at. And so she brought that to us. We started doing more research on it and realized that as you go through perimenopause, menopause, and the hormones start to shift, that can also start to slow down your ability, your metabolism. The
Mhm.
estradiol starts to shift. You start having issues with visceral fat and belly fat around the tummy where you just can't lose it. The thyroid starts to get a lot more sluggish. Your thyroid is responsible for temperature regulation. It also impacts your metabolism. It impacts like if you're having issues with constipation. There's a lot of different things that our hormones do that can impact our ability to lose weight. So I found that balancing out and focusing on both hormones and weight loss are they go hand in hand, and you really
Yep.
can't do one without the other if you really want to optimize and get patients to the place where, or people to the place where they can lose the weight, keep the weight off, address sleep and stress and all that stuff. So we try and take a really holistic look at this, and we're not just focused completely on the weight loss, but also bringing in the hormone balancing to help our patients reach their goals overall, but for optimal health.
And a lot of what you're talking about is this functional health model, right? Like a lot of this,
Ah,
everything is kind of integrated to each other. They all affect each
definitely,
other. The
definitely.
body is a system, the physical body, the mental part of the body, right? All of that sort of operates together. I'm curious, and you're obviously an expert in this, specifically as it applies to women's health. But we who work in this industry tend to throw around a lot of these terms: functional health, integrative health, and that means something to us, right? We're in and around it all day. But let me ask you this, do patients really understand what functional health is? Right? Or is it just a buzzword to them, that has something to do with hormones or has something to do with peptides or something, like
Right.
what is the perception of the client out there? And you mentioned you have to do a lot of educating, right? Is educating kind of on this new kind of functional health model that you're trying to sort of bring to your clients and to your patients? How much do they know about this stuff?
I think there's still a lot more to learn and
Yeah.
understand, even from a provider's perspective, because we've been trained with a different mindset. We're usually, as I mentioned, just for me being a nurse, I was a pill pusher, and I'm usually trying to chase the disease and trying to,
Yep.
give a band-aid for whatever the ailment is. But the space that I've been moving into and training and becoming a specialist in is really trying to get the root cause of why people are having a disease or some kind of breakdown in the body, so that I'm not going to be a pill chaser. And to go back to the reason why I chose weight loss, or just, I would say, even though it seems so silly, but for the most part, if someone is struggling with obesity, there could be a plethora of other diseases that they're going to be struggling with as a result of being obese or having high body fat, whether
Yep.
it's diabetes, hypertension, increased risk of cancer, increased risk of stroke, heart disease, heart attacks. There's so many different disease processes that stem from just being obese. If I can address the obesity, I can resolve many of the other issues. I have patients who are able to stop their blood pressure medications, stop their diabetes medications, and stop all these other different medications as a result of us just working on bringing the weight and the body composition down. So, in addition to the weight, now I'm starting to realize how important it is to try and get to the root cause. And some of the stuff is just basic. Are you getting enough sleep?
Totally.
Sleep is it's underrated how important it is for us to restore and allow our cells to restore and our brains to restore. I remember walking, I'm hoping to go on a tangent. I remember sometimes every morning I go out for a power walk, a motivation walk, and I'm listening to these little YouTube motivational speakers, and they're like, "No one has time to sleep. You've got to get up at the crack of dawn, and you got to go, 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 go. I'll sleep when I'm dead." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'll sleep when I'm dead." And I'm going like that, next thing I start having all these, the body is breaking down, I can't think, I
Yeah.
can't focus, I can't concentrate, and the more and more I go into the space of functional medicine, I'm realizing how important it is for us to sleep, and we don't emphasize that enough, and so many people, women especially, struggle as we go through the perimenopause and menopause
Right.
with all these surges and the stress of being
Yep.
able to sleep, and it really is a critical component to help us heal. So there definitely needs to be a lot more education for our patients as well as our providers that brings us to a place where we're not just putting band-aids on disease processes. We're really trying to get to, why is this person struggling with this? Why are their hands feeling cold? Or why are they constipated? Why do they keep having all this indigestion and this gas and this bloating? What is the body trying to tell us? Because if we listen to it, it'll tell us what we need to do
Yeah.
to heal it. But we're
It,
using pills and stuff to kind of cover up,
it
what.
may not be a pill to stop constipation. You might just need to not eat 2 hours before you go to sleep every day. You know what I mean? Or, and it's fine to wake up at the crack of dawn, but go to sleep at 9 p.m. You know what I mean? Like you gotta,
Gotta go back to the basics from the start. It's just going back to the basics, and it's hard because 'cause we're in such a high-paced, a high
yeah.
productive society right now.
And there's hype around everything, and there's a trend for everything, and so sometimes we get ahead of ourselves. And even when I talk about marketing with people, it's like you got to do the basics first before you go off and do these other things. Otherwise, these other things are not going to be as effective, or they may not even be the right thing for you, down the road. Um, I got one like kind of bigger question to maybe wrap our recording today, and that's if you were to the 8 year Dr. B experienced person, if you were to talk to yourself on day one of opening the Wellness NPs, um, what would you give? What advice would you give to your sort of younger, less experienced, less resilient self? If knowing what you know today.
What I know today, I would probably say get a support group and a team around you.
Yeah.
A team of professionals who know the business and different components, like my marketing person, an accountant,
Yep.
a finance person, an attorney. You want to have people in the room who can help guide and lead you as you're moving through just uncharted territory, so that you don't bump your head along the way. Because
Yeah.
I didn't have all of that, and I'm realizing how important it is now that we're trying to grow and trying to scale, how important it is to have that team. And then also have another support team would be just other business owners who are like-minded, because it can be a very lonely space. Your employees may not understand the sacrifices that you're making,
Yep.
the difficult decisions that you have to make. They may not always understand that. So having other business people that can be around you, as bump things off of each other, you're supporting each other because you all understand what it takes and how difficult it is. I think those two things would be what I would have done, because I didn't have all of those pieces together when I first started. I have
Totally.
now, and it's definitely make a world of difference to help me just keep putting one foot in step of the other, in front of the other, so I can just keep going. But I definitely think that support, that foundation and that support is important.
Yeah, and to your point, I think you're going in you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah,
And I think having that support group around you allows you to kind of expose your blind spots.
right.
But just like when we're driving, sometimes we miss our blind spot, right? We change lanes and someone starts honking at us and all that stuff. And that's going to happen to you even when you have a support group around. But the idea there is like, yeah, you might bump your head still, but maybe the bump is not gonna be catastrophic, right? That at least, like, you talk to someone and they're like, "Okay, if you're gonna go down this path, even though I advise you to, just be careful about this thing,"
Uh-huh.
right? And I
Mhm.
think a lot of times, like, as entrepreneurs, like, we have to make these decisions that, may or may not, that may have some financial impact to us, emotional impact to us, um, financial and emotional impact to the people you work with or the people who work for you, right? And so I think having that support group around kind of lessons that you don't know what you don't know,
Yeah.
and you're never going to be able to completely cover your blind spots, but at least you I swear, like, just running a business is all about not making that fatal mistake, and
Yeah.
getting past that survival period, kind of like you did, and moving into thriving until a fire happens where you kind of have to regroup and figure things out again. But I think your story is such an inspiring one, because it's a very typical entrepreneur story, right? You struggle, you see success, you struggle again, you see success, and that frankly is part of the game,
Mhm.
right? And I let me ask you this one, maybe one last question is, the person you are today versus the person you are 8 years ago, are you a different person?
I definitely have seen a lot of growth. I definitely, as I mentioned to you before, there's things my mindset is shifting on what matters,
Yeah.
what's most important, the people that I want around me. Um, you know, w- why am I doing what I'm doing? I'm definitely much wiser. I'm more patient. I'm more
Yes.
calculated. And I can definitely say without a shadow of a doubt that I've come a long way in terms of growth.
Yeah, and that's awesome. I think, like, we're just human to human, right? Like, entrepreneurship is about personal growth, really. It truly, truly is. And as you fix yourself and you improve yourself and you have that sort of mindset, kind of, I think what you're talking about, you'll see results in your business. I think it actually translates directly into like what you see from your business. And I always tell, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, hundreds, if not thousands of them over the years. And I always tell people like the person you are when you first start or not successful is not going to be the same person you are when you're successful. You have to be a different person to get to that level of success. And I think a lot of times when you see the motivational speeches and all the things on Instagram and all of that, you're seeing the end result of a struggle,
Right.
but you're not necessarily seeing the struggle.
Mhm.
And everything that you talked about today, all the resilience that you've built and the struggles that you've been through and are still going through, right? Even though you're quote unquote successful today, right? You still have struggles that you're going through. And I think the more you sort of, you don't have to embrace it in the sense like I love struggling because who truly loves it, right? But it's more so the end result if you get out on the other end of that struggle in a positive way, which is you've grown as a person, you've built something with your business, right? And I think in light of staffing challenges, in light of COVID, in light of fighting stigmas around weight loss and all the transitions that the weight loss industry has sort of been through over the years, I think you've actually drawn a really clear picture, and it's a muddy picture, right, of what it takes to run a business. And so,
Right. Right.
Dr. B, I really appreciate you just being so transparent and sort of honest, and I hope that if you're a practice owner out there that's in the very beginning of starting your practice, or even if you're one that's scaling your practice right now, that hopefully Dr. B, shared some important insights. So if you found this episode valuable, the best thing you can do is share it with another practice owner, share it with someone who might be starting their practice. I'll include all of Dr. B's and the Wellness NPs social media information and website information in the show notes for this podcast as well. But subscribe wherever you can listen, and we'll see you on the next one. I hope this has helped you waste less and grow smarter in your journey to grow your own practices. So thanks, Dr. B, for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Can I send a word of encouragement out?
Please.
Anyone who may be thinking or considering or in the middle of developing a business, don't give up on your dreams. It will be hard, but stick with it. If you love what you do, it's so rewarding. I can definitely say for my own self, it has been so fulfilling for me. I've learned so much about myself, as Andrew has said. You find out what you're made of when you develop a business and entrepreneurship. You'll find the resilience, the strength, the courage, the bravery, so much about yourself when you venture out and do it. So stay encouraged. That's all I'll say.
Cool. Thanks so much. Have a good one, everyone. Thank you.